Over the last 10 days, the Israeli National Police have been responding to ongoing terrorist attacks that have taken place not just in Jerusalem and in the heart of the old city, but also across the country. More than 3,500 police officers in the Jerusalem district are continuing to both prevent and respond to any further terrorist attacks. And whatever steps will be implemented at the next stage in order to prevent and be on the scene, and our police units will be there in order to help and save lives of Israelis across the country. The response of our police officers has been fast and swift. Each different terrorist attack is different, a different scenario. Our police officers respond, and half of the terrorists have been captured, the rest of them have been shot, and others have been killed. When there is no choice but to respond, we have to respond in the same way that any other police force across the world would do so as well. The responsibility of the Israeli National Police and its units will continue as long as necessary, and security measures are being made on a day-to-day basis. Now I'm going to show you the video and the movie from CCTV footage of what took place at that terrorist attack in Piskat Ze'ev. Let's follow carefully together as what's taking place. The two terrorists, both relatively young, 13 and 15 years old, already looking for their first victim, both knives, both armed. The man runs away across the zebra crossing. We're talking about a relatively quiet neighborhood. They're looking already for the next victim. Both of the terrorists are hunting for the next victim. Knives still pulled, knives still out. Everything seen on CCTV footage. What we're seeing now is from the angle inside the grocery store where these kids were buying sweets, where they were on their way home after school. And unfortunately, this 13-year-old boy, as you can see, is attacked. Within seconds, he's taken off his bike. He's attacked by those two individuals, by the two terrorists. And at this stage, he's already in serious to critical condition as that terrorist attack unfolds. Luckily, the Israeli civilians responded quickly, left the store in order to try and give assistance, and that's what we expect from our civilians to take place on the scene. And you can see the second attacker still with his knife, running in a public area. Our police officers arriving at the scene, and before our officers are stabbed and injured, they respond quickly. And in that specific attack, the terrorist is captured and the terrorists are killed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mickey from the police. We'll now take your questions. Do you want to make a statement?
Sure. No, I'll take
Prime Minister, make a statement and we'll take your questions.
Prime Minister. Any questions?
I'll choose the people, though. Financial Times.
John Reed from Financial Times. I was wondering whether Israel would be open to any diplomatic. Whether Israel would be open to any diplomatic interventions, including a possible meeting between the Prime Minister and President Abbas, and indeed whether any foreign powers such as the U.S. have intervened on behalf of this cause.
I called for this repeatedly, including in my recent speech in the UN. I'm perfectly open to it now. I've been talking to John Kerry and other leaders about such a meeting. I think it's potentially useful because it might stop the wave of incitement and the false allegations against Israel. So I'd be open to meetings with Arab leaders and the Palestinian leadership in order to stop this incitement and set the record straight.
No questions. Please, sir.
Moshe Dan, I wanted to ask you, there have been reports that some of the people who are upset with what happened in Dura, the arson in Dura, and I'm wondering, wouldn't it be better for the government to make closure on this and to arrest people if they need to be arrested and charged? And the second part of this question is, if the people who are guilty of the crime are not the 3 boys who are in jail now. Why are they in jail?
We are making every effort to find the people and to get the evidence to put them on trial. Does anyone in his right mind think that Israel would let these killers free? I condemned it immediately. I went to the hospital. I've yet to hear a condemnation from Abu Mazen, President Abbas, for the murder of these innocent Israelis. Not one word of condemnation. I didn't hesitate for a minute. I condemned it. I went to the hospital to visit that young boy, and we're taking care of him. There is an asymmetry here. Israel will not tolerate terrorism from anyone, Jews or Arabs. It doesn't make any difference for us. But in point of fact, there is a difference because we take an active policy. If we find the murderers and if we have the proof, you'll hear about it immediately. Believe me. You don't need to press me because I'm doing everything in my power to press our security forces on something that is not easy. It's very hard. Sometimes it's hard for us to apprehend Palestinian terrorists. Sometimes it's hard, as in this single case, to find the Jewish terrorists, but we will. I have no doubt about that. I think the idea that this is justification for murder. What would you say if we said, okay, if Jews are now murdered, as they are, and Israelis unleash a wave of contrary stabbings and attacks, would I condone it? Would I even raise it? I wouldn't. I would say this is outrageous. Nothing justifies the systematic and deliberate slaughter of the innocent, the attempt to menace or maim or murder innocent people. Nothing justifies it. I don't justify it. It's time that President Abbas stops not only justifying it, but also calling for it. He says he wants to see more blood spilled in Jerusalem. And it's time for the international community and fair-minded people to make that distinction. Stop justifying murder and stop calling for murder.
Mr. Prime Minister, Lisa said to the BBC, you said you're open to international intervention. We understand Secretary of State John Kerry will come here. He's likely to say that, Mr. Prime Minister, at some point you should go back to the negotiating table. What will you say to him? And if you don't believe negotiations are the way forward, what is the way out?
He's going to call on me for resuming negotiations? I've been calling. Are we living in the same planet, Liz? I've been calling day in, day out, in every forum, in the United Nations, in the U.S. Congress, in Israel, in Jerusalem, in Tel Aviv. I haven't done so in Nepal because I haven't visited it. I've called on President Abbas to resume unconditional negotiations immediately. Right now, as we speak, we can meet. I have no problem with that. I think we should stop immediately this wave of incitement against Israel and these attacks, murderous attacks against Jews. The point of my statement is simple. I'm willing to meet him. He's not willing to meet me. And you ask me about the resumption of negotiations? Come on, get with the program. These people don't want negotiations and they're inciting for violence. Direct your questions to them. And by the way, I'm not talking about international intervention. I'm talking about a suggestion that was raised that John Kerry and I and King Abdallah and others would meet. I have no problem with that. We did that a year ago. It was actually fruitful. Could happen again. Why not?
That's what you're calling for.
It's one possibility. If that is fine with me. I'm willing to do it. But I think President Abbas has to stop this incitement. You just saw examples of him lying, barefaced lies. An innocent child executed by Israelis. No, he's not innocent, and he wasn't executed. He tried to murder innocent people, almost succeeded. That's a lie. You should direct your questions to him. You can't give him a pass. In fact, the international community has been given Abu Mazen a pass all these years and all these months and all these weeks and all these days. And when you give somebody a pass when they're inciting violence, they continue to incite violence. And guess what? That violence is picked up by Palestinian youngsters, and they go out and murder Jews. And they murder peace, of course.
We're going to take a few questions now in Hebrew. I apologize to the English speakers who don't understand. Israel Channel 1.
אדוני ראש הממשלה, אבו מאזן ממשיך לשקר כלשונך, לא טועה, משקר כפי שאתה אומר. האם עם שקרן אפשר להגיע להסדר מדיני? האם אפשר להגיע איתו להסכם שלום? ושאלה נוספת ברשותך, ראינו כאן, שמענו גם את מנכ"ל בית החולים, האם לדעתך אבו מאזן היה מודע לכך שהנער בחיים ובחר לשקר, או שהוא פשוט השתמש במידע הזה שברשותו כדי להציס, למרות שהוא ידע?
אם הוא, כיוון שהוא משקר, שיפסיק לשקר, זה יעזור. זה יעזור לעשות גם, להרגיע את הרוחות, וזה יעזור כמובן לנסות לצאת מהמציאות הקיימת. האם הוא ידע? בוודאי שהוא ידע. הרי הדברים הללו היו נחלת הכלל, אין כאן שום שאלה. שאלת שאלה נוספת?
האם אבו מאזן הוא עדיין פרטנר, למרות שהוא משקר?
הוא צריך להוכיח.
האם אפשר להגיע איתו להסכם שלום?
קודם כל צריך להרגיע את הרוחות. קודם כל צריך להפסיק את ההסתה הפרועה הזאת. אי אפשר להתקדם לשלום אם מלבים גל טרור. אי אפשר גם טרור וגם שלום. זה או זה או זה. מי שניסה את זה בזמנו זה ערפאת, ואתה יודע לאן הדברים יידרדרו.
יש ניסיונות להגיע לפסגה בינך לבין אבו מאזן על פי פרסומים?
יש הצעה להיפגש, אולי בירדן. אני בוודאי מוכן לקדם אותה, אם הדבר הזה יעזור להרגעת הרוחות. צריך כולם עכשיו להתגייס להרגיע את הרוחות. חייבים להפסיק את מסע השקרים הפרוע הזה. אבל זה שקר. מה שאנחנו מגלים בכלל בהיסטוריה, זה ששקר, אם אתה לא חוסם אותו, הוא הולך ומתפשט. הוא הופך להיות אמת. כי מספיק אנשים חוזרים עליו. בעידן האינטרנט, מה שיש לך זה מפגש בין טכנולוגיה חדשה והשקרים של האסלאם הקיצוני, הרשות הפלסטינית, החמאס, התנועה האסלאמית בישראל. זה הולך ומתפשט, כמו ענן שמתפשט במהירות. לי אין דרך להילחם בשקר הזה, חוץ מאשר לומר את האמת. אין לי כלי אחר. הוכחנו את זה כאן, עם עובדות מוצקות. כשם שהשקר לגבי מסגד אל-אקצא הוא שקר מדהים. ראיתם את הנתונים, ראיתם את המדיניות, היא קיימת כבר שנים. לא השתנה שום דבר. לא בשנה האחרונה, לא בשנתיים האחרונות, לא בחודשים האחרונים, לא בימים האחרונים. אין שום אמת לטענה הפנטסטית הזאת, שקרית הזאת, שישראל מתכוונת להרוס את המסגדים, או ישראל מתכוונת לשנות את הסטטוס קוו. זה בדיוק על אותו רמת שקר של ההוצאה להורג של הילד הפלסטיני. בדיוק אותו הדבר. רק שפה אני יכול להוכיח את זה מיידית, ויזואלית. ושם השקר הזה הולך ומתפשט, כי קשה להוכיח. אחרי הכל באים פורעים, מתפרעים, שולחים את המשטרה למסגד אל-אקצא, שתנסה להחזיר את הסדר על כנו, והם טוענים את הטענה השקרית הזאת בדבר הר הבית. לכן אני חושב שהדבר המיידי שצריך לעשות זה להילחם בשקר, זה מה שאנחנו עושים כאן, ולמצוא את כל הדרכים להרגיע את הרוחות ולהפסיק את הטרור המשתולל הזה. כן.
אדוני ראש הממשלה, אתה דיברת הרבה על אבו מאזן כשקרן, ורציתי לשאול מה דעתך על ההודעה של מחלקת המדינה האמריקנית, איך אתה מגדיר את ההודעה שמתחה ביקורת על שימוש מופרז בכוח?
אני חושב שאין אמת בטענה הזאת. ישראל לא עושה שימוש מופרז בכוח, ישראל עושה בדיוק אותו שימוש בכוח שכל מדינה אחרת הייתה עושה. אני אשאל כאן את האנשים תכף באנגלית, מה אתם הייתם עושים? אם בניו יורק היו יוצאים אנשים עם סכינים, עם גרזינים, מה היו עושים שוטרי ניו יורק או וושינגטון או לונדון או פריז? הם היו מיד נוקטים פעולה כדי למנוע רצח והרג. זה בדיוק מה ששוטרי ישראל ואפילו אזרחי ישראל עושים, ועושים, אני מוכרח להגיד, בגבורה יוצאת דופן ובתושייה גדולה.
זה שקר מכוון או שלא יודעים את האמת?
לכן הטענה הזאת היא משוללת יסוד. היא נתמכת על ידי טענה כוזבת. תסתכלו על מספר ההרוגים. לפי ההיגיון הזה, ארצות הברית ובעלות בריתה היו התוקפנים והאשמים באפגניסטן. אני מעריך שיותר אנשים נהרגו באפגניסטן מאשר במגדלי התאומים. זה אבסורד. הטענה הזאת אין לה שום יסוד ושום ביסוס. ישראל עושה מה שהיא צריכה כדי להילחם בטרור בצורה הלגיטימית והנכונה שכל ממשלה אחרת, כל מדינה אחרת וכל משטרה אחרת היו נוקטים ואכן נוקטים בה.
אדוני ראש הממשלה, שאלה ששואל את עצמו, אני מניח כל ישראלי, כמה זמן זה עוד יימשך? כמה אתה יכול להאריך? שבועות, חודשים? כמה עוד
אינני יכול להעריך את זה. אנחנו עברנו גלי טרור, בעצם כמעט ב100 השנים האחרונות. אני תמיד מציין את שנת 1920, השנה שסבי עלה לארץ ישראל, כשנה שבה התחילו ההתקפות המאורגנות של פורעים, ועברנו את זה ב-20, ואחר כך ב-21 וב-29 בחברון והמאורעות 36 עד 39, ואחר כך הפדאינים, ואחר כך התקפות רבות אחרות, ועברנו את זה באינתיפאדה, עברנו את זה עם אוטובוסים מתפוצצים, עברנו את זה עם טרור מתאבדים, עברנו, הגלים האלה עולים והגלים האלה יורדים. אבל אני רוצה להעביר דבר אחד. מה שמביא את זה זה לא פעולה כזו או אחרת של ישראל. זה לא התנחלויות. אין גל מסיבי של התנחלויות. אין. זה לא משנה. זה גם לא היעדר אופק מדיני. כשהיה אופק מדיני, בתהליך השלום, סמוך לתחילת תהליך אוסלו, היה גל טרור עצום, אמרו, זה בגלל שהתחיל תהליך השלום. עכשיו, כיוון שאבו מאזן מסרב להיכנס למשא ומתן, אומרים זה בגלל היעדר אופק מדיני. אומרים לנו זה בגלל תסכול. זה לא בגלל מציאותו של אופק מדיני, ולא בגלל היעדר אופק מדיני, זה בגלל הרצון להיפטר למדינת ישראל. התסכול הוא בזה שאנחנו כאן, שמדינת ישראל היא כאן. ואני רוצה להגיד לך משהו, התסכול הזה יימשך, כי אנחנו נמשיך להיות כאן.
Thank you all very much.
No, I'd like to say that in English.
Please.
Don't deprive me. So I'd like to puncture some of the things that I heard. This wave of attacks is not the result of lack of political horizon. We've been suffering terror attacks for the last 95 years. 1920, 1921, 1936 to 1939, the Fedayeen attacks, the Intifada attacks, they were actually at their height during the beginning of the Oslo peace process, and people said, well, this is because these are enemies of peace. So the result, the explanation for the terrorist waves that we had then was the advance of peace. Now they say you have terrorist attacks because there is no peace. Neither is true. They're attacking us not because they want peace or don't want peace, it's because they don't want us here. If they're frustrated, I assure you that frustration will continue because we're going to continue to be here. As far as settlements are concerned, this is not a result of a massive wave of settlements because there's not been a massive wave of settlements. And second, we have something else. And the facts count. It is the very killers themselves who explain why they're doing what they're doing. They leave behind Facebook pages in which they cite and repeat Palestinian incitement about the Al-Aqsa Mosque. All the lies that are said about us trying to bring down the mosque or change the status quo, they cite that as the reason for their activity. And you can't fit a false template on reality. This is what is driving this current wave. I'm sorry. The old models don't apply. There's a Palestinian attempt to inflame violence based on the false allegations that we are changing the Temple Mount, now on the false allegations that we're executing innocent civilians. Doesn't wash. And I expect our friends around the world to look at these facts, recognize them for what they are, and I think to condemn these Palestinian attacks and to demand from Abu Mazen to stop the incitement and to restore calm. Anybody else in English? Yeah, please.
Luke Baker from Reuters.
The U.S. State Department has been somewhat concerned about excessive use of force used by some Israeli security forces. Are you worried both about losing, you talked about false symmetry, are you worried about losing the support of some of your allies and also losing control of this city, which you seem on the point of dividing?
No, we're not going to divide the city any more than people who are putting curfew in neighborhoods in towns in Europe or in the United States on occasion are dividing those cities. So don't get swept away, don't carry it away. Don't build your hopes high. That's the first point. The second point is, look, we expect every fair-minded observer to see that Israel is using exactly the kind of legitimate and the amount of legitimate force that any one of those governments, and those municipalities, and those police forces would use if they had people wielding knives, meat cleavers, axes, trying to kill people on their streets. What do you think would happen in New York if you saw people rushing into crowds trying to murder people? What do you think they would do? You think they'd do anything different from what we're doing? They might, actually, but certainly not less, okay? And what would happen in Washington? And what would happen in London? Or what would happen in Paris or Rome or Moscow or anywhere else? Of course, this allegation is totally false. It's utterly false. It's also utterly unfair because it's so obviously, patently false. So I expect fairness, and I expect to put blame where it's due, and to say, here's a fact. We're now being told from the hospital that the condition of the Palestinian would-be murderer is light, but the condition of the young boy that he attacked is actually very critical. So the attacker comes out on the cheap, so to speak. And yet people are making a moral symmetry at best between the attacker and his victim. And much worse, they're accusing Israel of being the guilty party in this case. And that just will not fly. You know, the first order of the day in fighting terrorism is moral clarity. Nothing justifies terrorism. Nothing exonerates it. And stop trying to explain it away. This is terrorism, murder, pure and simple. Abu Mazen is inciting murder. Make him accountable and stop trying to justify it in any way. Not with settlements, not with peace process, not with anything. It is unjustifiable and unacceptable, and the mere fact that this is brought up as a possible explanation, of course, gives the terrorists a justification that they don't even use. They might now, but they haven't up to now, and that tells you a lot. I want to thank you. Thank you very much.
I thank the Prime Minister, I thank the senior staff of the office, and I apologize personally to everyone who wanted to ask a question and didn't get a chance. Thank you.